the world you stepped down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, all for love's sake became born. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Thou art be seated.
Amen. We are so blessed. And I know that we take so much for granted. But I do so much appreciate our people who are involved in music, those who use their gifts and their talents to play the instruments, and for those who lead and participate. But we are blessed. We really are, whether we recognize it or not. I also wanted to say thank you to Greg and Lois Byram. Yesterday they opened up their home to a whole lot of people and provided some food for the grill, and other people came, and we had a good time with our international students. I don't know how many of them there were, but, Yeah. So we had a great time. People from China, people from Taiwan were there, people from Canada, and we had a good time. It was certainly worth it. I want to encourage you to come back tonight. We're looking at the text tonight in John chapter 8, verse 12 through verse 59. How far we get, the Lord alone knows. But it's covering the period of conflict. And as the period of conflict gets worse, as the truth got clearer. I think that's kind of interesting in the analogy of what happens today. And in the Gospel of John there tonight, we'll look at the closer they got to the truth, the harder they became. Very interesting text, and I encourage you to come back tonight. But it really does kind of dovetail the subject matter of things getting tough in Genesis in chapter 26. We're picking up where we left off last week. You have a handout, I believe, from last week. I trust that you do have it. If you don't, oh well. There's a new one that you can get where we plan to get to today. But just a simple review of where we were in last week in Genesis in chapter 26. We talked about problems. The fact of the matter is, the principle for dealing with problems. The truth of the matter is, problems are cyclical. How many have had good times? Let's see your hands. How many have had bad times? How many have had good times after the bad times? How many had bad times after the good times? All right, I guess that pretty much makes my point. Problems are cyclical. And so that was one of the points that we looked at. And the other perspective in dealing with those problems is manifested in the book of Job in chapter 1 and verse 21. If anybody ever had problems, Job certainly had problems, but the attitude that he had to go through those problems did not remove the problems, but it helped him to be able to live with the problems, and that was to realize a truth in Job chapter 1, verse 21, and that is, and you see if you can say it with me, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. No matter what comes, we recognize that our good things come from God, and when they go, the Lord allows them to go. So the good, the bad, the ugly, we need to thank God for all things. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. And then the practical application of that truth we looked at is found in the book of Genesis in chapter 26. And Genesis chapter 26, as we mentioned, it says, and there was a famine in the land. And there are troubles and problems and things that come our way that we have absolutely no control of. We don't control the weather, and there are other things that happen we don't control. But the fact of the matter is, those things will come. Famines will come. And that was one of the points of last week. And then with that, then also he gave to him as that the parameters, or the word came. We find here in Genesis 21:6, it said, and there was a famine. And then in verse 2, and it says, and the Lord appeared unto him, and then he began to give him some instructions. Or you could say he gave him some parameters. And was made reference to this morning. Here is our parameters. The parameters for our life, God has laid them down in His Word. And you know what? We take so much for granted. There are some people that I communicated with that are in a place where they don't even have a Bible. And when I said something about having a Bible, and they said, no, we don't have a Bible. I said, you know where the missionaries are? I said, the missionaries are so far away from us, we cannot get to them. We don't have a Bible. And I thought, how sad it is. They don't have that which you and I have right here in our hands, the parameters to give guidance. And without this GPS, as you said, without this GPS, we're kind of flounder a little bit because we don't have a clear direction. Well, God gives us His parameters. And God gave the parameters here to Isaac as Isaac was going through a time of famine in his life. He gave him some very clear promises that would, and it was based upon the covenant that was made with Abraham. And one of the things that he was saying to him, he says, my word is reliable. You can count on it. I said it to Abraham and I meant it. You can count on my word. You can trust in His word. And so He gave him some clear instructions. And his instructions were that he was to stay in the land, not to leave. He was to sojourn in the land, that means to travel within the land. And He promised him that he would be sustained in the land. He'd be taken care of. And then at the end of that, in verse 5, He gave him a reminder, which I looked at, and I wondered, well, why did He say that? He said, Abraham obeyed the voice and kept my charge and my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And these promises came to him. Was a way of reminding him as he was going through the problems, as he was beginning to face the problems, to remember this. I took care of Abraham. He honored my word, he obeyed my word, and he was blessed. And so it will be for him, and so it will be for you. And then we went from there to the test came. And we talked about when the rubber meets the road. Talk is cheap. It's easy to say, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'll do this when this comes. We don't know what we're going to do for sure. We'd like to hope that we're going to do the right thing. But when the time comes, and it did, the test came. And he was put to the test in 26 verse 6. And here we find the test, and it says, when the test came, it said, and Isaac dwelt in Gerar. Otherwise, when the test came, he stayed. He stayed in the land just exactly like God said. When everything inside of him says, I want to run, I want to leave, I want to go someplace else where it's easier. And God said, you stay. And he said, I'm staying. But everything in me says, I want to run. He says, I know that over there in Egypt, they're not having a drought. They're not dealing with the famine. The grass is green, the water is great, and everything there is fine. And he said, oh, the grass looks so good over there. Oh, I'd really love to go over there. It'd be so much easier over there. But God said, stay here. So when he was tempted to run in the midst of all of his troubles, he stayed where God said to stay. To make the best of what he had, he stayed there. And so many times we find ourselves in those difficult times, we want to run. And God says, stay. We want to quit. And God says, don't. We want to throw in the towel. God says, don't. Honor his word. That's what he said. Now the test came. The test came. Was he going to do what God had said? But then he had a good start. And here's where we pick up, I think, where I left off last week. He had a good start, but he struggled along the way. How many have ever had a good start in doing something, but then you start... Tom, you wave your hand. So I can do this. I can survive. And then, oh, wow. You know, we get a good start. And, you know, we have examples of people who've done that. Here it says here in verse 7. Now, he had a good start, verse 6. Verse 7. And the men of the place asked him of his wife. There you go. That'll get you in trouble. No. Stop. I had a good start till then. All right. I had to go there. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister. For he feared to say, she is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill him for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And now here he had a good start. He meant well, but he struggled along the way. We've got a lot of people that we know who've done the same thing. You can think about Peter. Peter was in the midst of the storm. All of us could probably remember the story. He was in the midst of the storm. And he saw Jesus coming in the midst of the storm. And he found out that that's who it was. And he said, Lord, if it be you, or since, the word if is since. Lord, since it is you, bid me come to you. Because he's walking on the water. I always ask, well, why did he say, I want to walk over there? Was he want to walk on the water to get over there to show off to the other 12? Hey, look at this, I can walk on the water. No. It was because in the midst of trouble, where's the safest place to be? Close to Jesus. And in the midst of all the storm and the torment and the wind and the waves and everything else, here he is in the midst of it. He says, Lord, bid me to come to you. I know if I'm next to you, I'm going to be okay. And the Lord said, come. And he had a good start. He got out of that boat and he started to walk. Do we have anybody can walk on the water over here? No? You can walk on the water? Good for you. I saw somebody go under the water. They didn't walk on it. But he started out walking on the water. He had a good start. But what did he do? He started to notice the wind, the waves, and then he began to look at the circumstances around him. And he got his eyes off of the Lord, and he began to focus on, whoa, what have I got myself into here? And now he begins to sink. Of course, then the Lord saw that, and the Lord reached out and rescued him, and we see that. But you see, he had a good start. Then he struggled, and he was restored. Now, if you think that that was just Peter, we'll look at one of the people in the Scripture who is one that we look up to with great admiration. And if we talk about who is one of the greatest saints in the New Testament, one of the names surely would rise to the top would be the Apostle Paul. And what do we find out about the Apostle Paul? He had a good start. But we find somewhere along the way, he put down his testimony in the book of Romans in chapter 7. In Romans chapter 7, he said, you know, the things that I want to do, I don't do. And the things that I don't want to do, those are the things that I do. Oh, wretched man that I am, who's going to deliver me from this? How many understood what he said when he said that? How many have been there? Oh, well, Lord, I want to be faithful. I want to be true. I want to do the right thing every day, all day long, all the time. I want to stand in the midst of all the stuff. I don't want to quiver or wobble at all. But then I find, and I don't want to eat that chocolate pie or those cinnamon rolls. I'm not going to do that. Then I get my eyes off. And then I go to places like the Byrams last night, and they had chocolate cream pie. And they had some apple stuff there. They had some of this cake that had this good stuff on it. How do I know? Because I tried it. I had a good start. I mean, if you'd have looked at my plate when I started, I put a little bit of potato salad. Anybody look at it? I just put one little spoonful, just a little bitty one there, and a little spoon of this and a little spoon of that. But it was so good. I went back again. And again. Oh, wretched man that I am. I left and said, Lord, I didn't mean to do it. He said, you lie, you meant to do it. I know you did. But I didn't want to. That, Romans chapter 7. I struggled. I struggled. In the face of the adversity, he struggled. But he had a good start. And he struggled. So that happened to Paul. That happened to Peter. That happened to you, and it happens to me. And we look here at Isaac. Isaac had a good start. He stayed, but he struggled. And we see the struggle here was in verse 7. What was his struggle? He feared for his life. That's what he said. He feared for his life. Now let me ask you. How many think that Isaac should have feared for his life under those circumstances? Would you please raise your hands? Boy, if Isaac was here today, he wouldn't have liked what you said. But why should he not have feared? Anybody. Why shouldn't he have feared? Because of the Lord. What do you mean? He was walking with the Lord. He was where he's supposed to be, doing what he's supposed to do. But he had something else. He had a promise. God said so in his word. And so he had the promise of God. He was where he knew he was supposed to be. And now he had a challenge before him. And God has already told him, said, your seed is going to be like this as the stars. And he gave him all those promises, so he knows it's going to be okay. Got the promise. It's going to be all right. But he feared. And we all said he shouldn't have feared. Except for one person here, I'll give him credit, one person said, yeah, he had a legitimate fear. But we all sit here and say, he shouldn't have feared anything because he's got the promise of God. I just read it. God appeared to him and said, look, you do this, I'll sustain you, I'll take it. We all said that. Because he had God's word. All right? It's pretty easy to point a finger over here, isn't it? Folks, do you and I have any promises of God? And do you and I need to apply that same finger to us and say, what are you afraid of? Should you be fearful? And if I'm going to do, as I just did here with Isaac, shouldn't I say the same thing? What am I fearful of? I have those promises that we read earlier where the Lord said that I will be with you. How many have the Lord with you? All right, if you have Christ as your Savior, He's with you. That's what He said. And He says, and I will bless you. How many believe that God said He's going to bless you? All right, He said He's going to bless us. And He's going to take care of all those things. So why are we so fearful? Why are we so fearful? We're no better than Isaac. In fact, I'd like to be as good as Isaac in many ways. But he struggled along the way, for he feared for his life. You know, the truth is, as it's recorded in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 7, it says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. One of my daily prayers is, Lord, help me to remember that you have not given me a spirit of fear. And say, but it's power. And how do I know that I have that power? The power comes in knowing my position in Christ. And when I know my position is in Christ, I know that I am secured no matter whatever happens. So I have that sense of power, and then I pray for the passion to love and for the purity of mind. And so we have power. And in the book of Proverbs, in chapter 28 and verse 1, it said, the righteous are as bold as a lion. I haven't seen too many lions that appear to be fearful when we see them. They appear to be bold. And why is it that the righteous, he said, are bold as a lion? Because if I know my position in Christ, if I know the promises of God's Word, if I know I am secure in Him, you can do anything you want to do with me. It's all right. I can stand up and be bold and stand on truth and righteousness and proclaim that truth without fear of anything, for I know that the Lord is with me. Daniel went and he stood and he said, look, I'm not going to do that. And they took him and they put him in the lion's den. Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, when they said, you got to bend or you bow or you're going to burn. And they said, we won't bend, we won't bow, and if God wants, we won't burn. But they stood. Why? Because they stood on truth. The martyrs of the years gone by stood upon truth, and God gave them grace to stand. And He'll do the same thing for you and me. The same thing. So the righteous are as bold as a lion. And in Philippians, which happens to be the book we're studying in Bible studies, in Philippians in chapter 1, I looked at this verse in verse 28. And it says, and in nothing terrified by your adversaries. The word terrified is the same concept like a horse being startled. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of I've seen some video of a horse at a racetrack that was startled, and they were pulling a one of the buggies or whatever they race with. Yeah, and it's pulling that, and the thing got startled, and it jumped off, and it started running out into the stands and pulling that thing and caused all kinds of chaos because it's startled. And he says here, he says, and in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident of token perdition, but to you of salvation and that of God. And what it was saying here, as I studied that out, he's saying here that those individuals who come up against us are adversaries when we are not terrified and we don't run and hide because they stand up and they say something or laugh at us and mock at us, but you stand up and say, look, folks, I really do believe the Word of God. I believe it's true and I'm not ashamed of it. And you know what? You'll find that they become terrified. They began to figure out that we couldn't laugh them into shame. We couldn't laugh them to shut up. And when they stood up, all of a sudden they go, whoa, whoa. And so the righteous are as bold as a lion. Now, I can say, in all honesty, There's something I don't understand about what happened here, about trying to pawn his wife off. But I will say this, though I don't understand it, he did have a real fear. His deception was, he said, she is my sister. His deception is just an outright lie. And she was 60 years old. She was as good looking as my wife. I won't tell you how old she is. But she was good looking. And so we also could perceive, and my understanding is that Jacob and Esau were probably not there. For Jacob and Esau, perhaps it is suggested what happened, that Jacob and Esau, when the famine came, they knew that the land that they were on was not able to sustain all the flocks and the herd that they had, so they left Jacob and Esau there with a limited amount, and they took the other and they went someplace else. And so they show up there and there's no children. There's no Jacob and Esau. So if Jacob and Esau had been there, they would have said, yeah, there's some kids here. Perhaps that was a suggestion. I thought it had some merit, so I'll pass it on to you. But then, so he did what he did, and he surely was found out. These things do have a way of finding themselves out, don't they? What's it say? Let's take a look at this here, verse 8 through 10. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing Rebekah, his wife. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety, she is thy wife. And how saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. Well, it might have been worth dying for, but that's another story. He was found out. Now, the relationship up to this time that Isaac had with Abimelech apparently was a fairly good relationship, because he had Isaac dwelling close to where he was. He was a king. And you don't always get to live that close to the king. So he put him there close to him, no doubt, so he could benefit from his presence and to be there. So they had a friendship, apparently somewhat of a close friendship. And one day, Abimelech was in such a position that he could look from where he lived, and he saw over there into the tent area where Isaac and Rebekah were, and he saw some things going on that looked like the kind of activity between a husband and a wife, not a brother and a sister. He said, something's not right. He was found out. And then Abimelech, as we read there, rebuked him. He brought him forward and he rebuked him. And he rebuked him and said, you didn't tell me the truth. You didn't tell me the truth. This cannot be your sister. This must be your wife. What do you have to say for yourself? And then Abimelech said to him, what is this that thou hast done unto us? One of the people might likely have lain with your wife, and thou should have brought guiltiness upon us. And I saw that, and I thought, one, he rebuked him, and said, I don't know what it is you think of us, but we have higher standards than that. And you know what? Just because a person is not necessarily a believer in the Lord does not mean that they may not have some pretty high standards. In fact, the matter is, there are some folks who don't know Christ as their Savior who hold to a higher moral standard than many of God's people. Sad to say, but true. And here, you can be moral in the world's plane and still be lost. I like to take the $1 million bill. You've all seen the $1 million bill. I like to take that out to some people who are good, honest people. And most of the people I find are good, honest, and decent people. They're basically moral people. And I show them that. And they say, it looks good, but it's not good enough. They had good standards, but it's not good enough for getting into glory. They may have had some standards, but he misread them. He said, what do you think of us? To think that we're that kind of people? Somebody could have taken her, and then we would have been responsible for that. So sometimes we do a disservice by imposing that anybody who does not believe on the Lord doesn't have some standard of morality in their life. They may have. And so he rebuked him. And I want you to see, I just learned this about vultures. I think that should show up here. It's vultures. I don't know what kind of vultures they are, but somebody told me about vultures. And they said that vultures mate for life. I didn't know that. That vultures mate for life. The male, the female, they mate for life, and they remain faithful to that one that they're mated to till death. But if one of the vultures begins to cheat on the other, all of the vultures will gather around and kill the one that's cheating. I said that to some ladies up at the golf course, and they said, well, amen. Like, all right, go Vultures. We'll have a new team called the Vultures. But I thought that was interesting. They have a standard that they adhered to. Would that we honored the same kind of things. But you know what happened? When Isaac was rebuked, he received the rebuke and he learned from it. How many have ever been rebuked? Question is, did you learn from it? He was rebuked. He received the rebuke because he knew it was true. And he learned from it. And there is no indication anywhere in Scripture that he ever did anything like that again. He learned his lesson. He never did it again. And then we see he survived, for he was protected and blessed. In verse 11 through verse 14, it says, and Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Then Isaac sowed in the land and received in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. And the man became great and went forward and grew until he became very great. For he possessed of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. He was protected and he was blessed. And so, as a result of him being protected and blessed, he sowed seed. And he sowed seed there in chapter 26, verse 12. And the Lord blessed the seed that was sown. He took the seed that was sown, and he took for every one seed of grain that he put out there, he got 100 in return. In Psalm 126 and verse 5 and verse 6, it says something like this. It says, they that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. And it goes forth weeping. Why is he weeping? Because they're in a famine. And they don't have a whole lot. And it is in faith that they take this seed grain, rather than eat it, they take the seed grain and they plant it. And with every one they plant, said, Lord, this is all I got. This is all I got. I'm counting on you. This is all I got. And he put the seed out there, and God took the seed that was sown and he blessed it. Now turn, if you would, to 2 Corinthians in chapter 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Second Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 6 to verse 8. He said, but this I say, he that soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly. And he that soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposed in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound unto every good work. So there is the seed They sow it, and here we come to 2 Corinthians, and it talks about here that he that sows sparingly shall reap sparingly. He that sows bountifully shall reap bountifully. And we're talking about sowing here in hard times. When he was sowing the seed, it was not when he had a great abundance, but he was faithful with the seed he had, and he sowed what he had, and he could sow, and God blessed what he could, and blessed it. Now, I thought I would try to illustrate that. So I have a penny. Now, I'm going to sow the 1 penny I got. This is what happened. It's the 1 penny. I'm going to give it, Lord. All I have is a penny to my name, and so I give my 1 penny. But because I gave the 1 penny, God took that 1 penny, and he turned it into $1. That's 100 pennies. Wow. With that kind of return on your investment, how many would like to do that? How many got some pennies you'd like to come? All right. I got some guys up here. You want it? I won't give it to you. But you didn't give me a penny, so I can't give you the $1. You want to give me a penny? You have a penny? You don't have a penny? Well, if you don't give me a penny, you get nothing. All right. All right. Who has a penny, by the way? Anybody have a penny? You have to run too far. Tom, you got a penny? Shelly's got a penny. Come up here, Shelly. Here, you can have the $1. Give me the penny. That was a pretty good change, wasn't it? Of course, I took her penny to start this illustration with, but but there's a penny that became $1. Now, if I took the $1, that's 100 pennies, and I invested that $1, then it'd come back as to 10. Now, how many would like to give me $1? Wow. She was pretty joyful. But that's the principle. And the more he gave, God blessed it 100-fold. In fact, the Scripture says, I think somewhere in the New Testament, that God will bless us 100-fold. He said to reckon that the suffering of the present time not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. We give a penny of our reckoning of our suffering, and he takes a penny and turns it into 100-fold from his perspective. And say, go ahead. And does that encourage you? It sure encourages me. And so we need to then attempt great things for God and expect great things from God. So the more he did, now, we know, so he gave. And as a result of his giving, he was blessed. And you know what? He was blessed a very great amount. Why? Because he just sit back and said, Lord, you said you're going to bless me. Send it in. And the Lord says, let's see what you got. Well, it's not fair that she got $10. I didn't get $10. Give me $10. Well, you didn't give me a penny. You didn't give me $1. You didn't give me anything to work on. Well, this one is doing great. Yeah, that one's working. That one's doing something. There's something there to bless because they invested. The farmer has a great big harvest. Why? Because he put some seed in the ground. If you put no seed in the ground, what can you expect to come up? And if we put a limited amount of seed in the ground, you're going to get a limited amount of harvest. So it's a faith principle. You give, you reap what you sow. And so it is in the book of Haggai. Turn to Haggai. Here's a valid question. Haggai chapter 2 and verse 19. And I'm just interested in the first part of this verse. Because it says in the first part of the verse, is the seed yet in the barn? There is the question. We want a harvest, and God said, where's the seed? It's still in the barn. He says, you got to get it out of the barn and get it out there and plant it if you want the harvest. And the question for us individually, collectively, is where is the seed? Is the seed still in the barn? Are we still asking God to pour out His blessings and meet all of these things, and it's still in the barn and we haven't used what we've got? He says, it's still in the barn. Well, is it still in the barn? You know, we had a work day yesterday. Steve Heath did a great job organizing, putting it all together. I showed up and I was amazed, personally, honestly, I was amazed with how many people had shown up to go to work. There were a large crew for this church working outside, painting, doing all kinds of things. And then we had people on the inside working, doing all kinds of things. And I just marveled, said, wow, this is really, really great. It inspired and encouraged my heart. But let's say only Steve had shown up. One, he'd been a little bit discouraged. But you know what? He'd have taken his bucket and his paint, and he'd have started, and he'd have got something done. But it wouldn't be nearly as much as what got done when everybody jumped in and did something. And much was accomplished because there were more people doing it. In the scripture, it says in Matthew chapter 28, it says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. Where? All the world. Where to go? Where to give it? Where to do it? Where to take the seed we have? And by all things and all means do all that we can within the confines of God's word to reach whoever we can. So the question comes back to us. How are we doing? How are we doing? Are we maximizing the seed sown? Are we even sowing the seed? Now, by the grace of God, we as a body have stretched out and attempted some things here in the recent years to attempt some things that are a little bit scary. And I'll go back to the day back when we was in the other building. I remember somebody came to me and they said, preacher, we have the opportunity to take our Sunday morning services, record it, and put it on the local access channel. Would you do it? Well, at that time, I was a little bit reluctant. I didn't even tell the congregation. I was reluctant. You know why? Because I figured there's some things that I'm saying in-house that I might not want out-house. If you understand. But then the Lord spoke to my heart and said, now wait a minute, what are you here for? If I've opened the door for you to be able to do it and you don't go to that door, then maybe I need to kick you out of the door and get somebody else in there that will do the job. And so we worked through that, and so we started going on the access channel and recording the morning services. And then they came to us again, another door opened up, and they said, hey, would you be willing to fill in some time on Monday through Friday? We've got all this dead space there, and we can use it. Could you do that? And God spoke to my heart and said, well, yeah, okay, do that. So I stepped out and said, okay, Lord, I don't know. I don't know if I can come up with that kind of stuff. I know you think that's a miracle to say I'd say that because you think I'm long-winded, and I'm not. But I didn't know what I was going to do for all those messages. Well, now I've got more messages than I ever thought, and Mike is backed up about a month and a half with messages that aren't even out there yet. So but the Lord took care of that. So now we're on the public access channel on Sunday, and on Monday through Friday, 2 a.m., 7 a.m., and 11 p.m. 3 days, 3 times in a day. And God had made that door open, available to us. So we have that opportunity. We have the opportunity that we have here as a local assembly when we come together. We have a Bible school whereby people can study. We have a Sunday morning service where we seek to proclaim this book. And then we have these opportunities that we have here. And then the church here just recently, within the last couple of years, said, look, let's step out in faith and do one more thing to try to reach people for Christ. Let us bring somebody on full time to work in the area of youth ministries in this church and reach out into our community and start an after-school program and start trying to do those kind of things. And you say, you know, that's going to cost us something to do that. But you can't keep the seed in the barn. And so, okay, Lord, we're going to take the seed we got and we're going to sow it out there by faith, by your grace, to try to reap the harvest in your name. And we take the seed and sow the seed and stick it out there and stretch it out there in faith and say, Lord, here it is. And so, yes, we have avenues from the church ministries directly that are reaching out there. But you know something? It's got to be more than that. Because a real effective seed sowing goes when Kurt goes out on a job and he talks to somebody there, he talks to them about the Lord. Or when Stephen talks about going out to work and he talks to a person there about the Lord. And when Kippy goes out there, he takes some seed that he's got in his pocket and he sows it out there. And if 100 people get up from this place and walk out with the seed and everybody sows seed, do you think there'll be a harvest? I believe it. But if we keep the seed in our pocket, there's not going to be much of a harvest. If we want a harvest, we got to sow some seed. We got to take the seed that He gives to us, the opportunities, and some have more opportunities than others. I have more opportunities probably than most anybody here. And I go out in public and I try to take advantage of every single one of them that I have. And I talk to them. And in fact, one day, it was so hard to keep my mouth shut. All I could do was go like this. Well, what happened, I was sitting down in my usual spot, having my coffee, behaving myself, which I don't always do, and nobody had come in to talk to me, and this couple of people came in, and one of them, obviously, is a believer, and the other one is some kind of an agnostic, and they got talking about spiritual things, and they're sitting right over there, and just an arm's throw away from me. And one guy starts talking about this, you know, all kinds of stuff. Well, what about evolution? What about this? And he was just everywhere. He was just going every which way. And the guy started to say, but, you know, I used to be that way, but I came to know the Lord. And for everything that he went, he confronted him. And I wanted him to turn to me and say, what do you think? And I was sitting there, and the Lord said, shut up. I had thoughts. I wanted to share them. I did. But he said, you shut up. But this other guy was sowing some seed. When he got up, the other guy walked out. The guy who was a believer got up, and I looked at him and I went, good job. That's all I can say. Lord, my mouth. But that guy was doing the work. See, it wasn't for me to do the work. It's for us to do the work. Is a seed in the barn. Is a seed in the barn. We take what God has given to us, and let's take it out there in faith. Yes. Does that mean you take that precious seed, which you don't have much of, and you put it out there? Yeah. How much do you want back? Well, they wouldn't even give me a penny. So they're not going to get a thing back. He wants to give me a 10 so he can get 100 back. Well, I've started something now. But you know, God's bank isn't broke. He's able. You didn't get to your second sheet. But this, the problems came, and problems will come. God's parameters are laid out very clearly in His Word. We'll be put to the test. And if we'll honor His Word, we'll prevail by grace, and we will survive the test, even though we struggle on the way. And God will take, if we honor and obey, take the seed that He's given to us and sow in tears, we will reap in joy. The question, I guess, for us, individually, to ask ourselves, and me myself, is the seed still in the barn?